This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. Hopefully, you're watching this before you fire up Netflix because this will be informative but not quite as exciting as, let's say, The Old Guard. Here's what we have in tonight's show. The Trump administration reversed a rule that would have sent international students back to their home countries this upcoming school year. We'll talk about what that means for colleges. Then, we'll break down why the US has been slow to adopt tech for digital contact tracing. But first, here's what you need to know right now. The US has averaged more than 62,000 new coronavirus cases every day for the past week. Texas, California, and Florida now account for more than half of those cases, with several other states also seeing daily highs. Meanwhile, at least 27 states have paused or rolled back plans to reopen their economies, but one thing several cities are still trying to figure out is the start of the school year. The Trump administration is pushing for in-person classes. Today, the American Academy of Pediatrics sent a letter to Congress saying they also think that's the best course of action, but more funding for schools is needed to make that happen. Dr. Anthony Fauci says while the goal is to have kids in classes, location is a huge factor.
If you're in the part of a country where the dynamics of the outbreak are really minimal, if at all, then there's no problem at all in getting back. If you're in a situation where you're in outbreak mode, then you leave it up to the local individuals.
Some districts like Los Angeles and San Diego have already made the choice to be online for the full fall semester. Nashville and Dallas are areas that have pledged to start the semester remote. Other places like New York have a phased plan in place. Today, George Floyd's family announced a civil lawsuit against the city of Minneapolis and the officers involved in his death.
It is about accountability. We're tired of seeing African Americans be pacified with simply an arrest. That's fine, but we want the full prosecution, and we also want the city to understand responsibility. And cities and companies only talk in dollar bills, sadly.
It comes less than 2 months after Floyd was killed in police custody. The 4 officers that were on the scene are already facing criminal charges. Floyd's death, of course, sparked nationwide protests against racism and police brutality. Birth rates are falling worldwide, and that could result in shrinking populations by the end of the century for almost every country globally. This is from a new study on fertility rates, which looks at a trend decades in the making that could mean a smaller and older population worldwide. That's especially true for countries including Spain and Japan, which could see their populations cut in half by 2100. The big factor here is the number of babies we're having. In 1950, women were averaging almost 5 children in their lifetime. Today, the average is about 2. Long term, that might be good for the environment, but it creates some challenges when you consider all of the old people that those fewer young people are going to have to support. The Trump administration reversed immigration policy that would have deported international college students if they didn't attend their classes in person this fall. Newsy's Ben Chamiso explains what that means for colleges.
Thousands of international students are breathing a sigh of relief, and fall planning is back on track for colleges after the Trump administration walked back a rule that would have barred foreign students in the US from taking all their classes online.
So it's still really good to have that confirmation and have that backing that even if I were to do online classes, I would not have to leave the country.
I can finally stop thinking about other options and just keep going, moving on with my life.
The White House reversal came after 19 states and scores of universities sued the government over the plan to require foreign students to take in-person classes or face deportation. Colleges argued that forcing international students to go home during the pandemic was cruel and in some cases logistically impossible. Harvard University said in a statement that ICE sought to force each of us to choose between the health of our communities and the education of our international students, a false and dangerous choice which we rejected.
I come from Malaysia. That's just one of the tons of countries that these students can come from. You don't know what kind of circumstances they have back home, kind of country they're going back to, if the environment is even fit for them to be studying in with Wi-Fi concerns.
The policy reversal is also a big financial boon to more than 100 universities that plan on teaching virtually in the fall. Still, the week-long battle to reverse ICE's guideline may have caused lasting damage by making studying in the US a less attractive prospect to millions of people around the world.
It also sent a message to international students about how quickly an administration like this that views immigration through a really negative lens can just turn it off and take away those opportunities. There's no doubt that this will have effect on the enrollment of international students.
Moving forward, I'm thinking about, will I recommend the United States to other potential international students? Probably not. I'd probably say go to somewhere that really wants you and will not kick you out.
Before the pandemic, international students had to take most of their course load in person. But the government created an exemption in March for the duration of the health emergency. Facing a major backlash, the Trump administration agreed on Tuesday to keep the exemption in place for now.
I'm not totally relieved because I think he can just change something out of the blue Monday and then.
Either way, analysts now believe the government has their hands tied until the end of the coronavirus crisis.
We have federal law on administrative decision making that says that agencies must be reasonable when they make these decisions. Because ICE put this exemption in place with the pandemic in mind, the reasonable thing to do would be to wait until the pandemic is over to lift that exemption.
Ben Chamiso, Newsy, Chicago.
It's not right to laugh at the pain of others, but we might indulge a bit at the expense of high schoolers when you're back.
As coronavirus spreads across the country, you might be looking for ways to make sense of it all. Newsy is here to help with some deeper context, explaining and reporting on the pandemic. Virology, only on Newsy. Be informed, not influenced.
Sure. Memes and cat videos are fun, but actual news might be a bit more useful. Follow Newsy on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get straightforward, opinion-free news right on your social news feed.
If you sidestep hashtags like Wednesday Wisdom, you might actually learn a little something by looking at today's trending topics, like how not to get fired on your day off. Nick Cannon is trending after Viacom CBS dumped the entertainer for hateful speech and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories.
Is when we talk about those the six corporations, when we go as deep as the Rothschilds, centralized banking, those the 13 families, the bloodlines that control everything even outside of America.
Cannon later defended himself on Twitter saying, "Anyone who knows me knows that I have no hate in my heart nor malice intentions." He added, "I hold myself accountable for the moment and take full responsibility." Viacom CBS owns VH1, which hosts Cannon's show, Wildin' Out. Ivanka Trump is trending after the White House advisor / president's daughter did her best Billy Mays impression, giving a Twitter sales pitch for a can of Goya black beans. This comes a few days after the CEO of the Goya food company praised President Trump at a White House event. In addition to being just prime meme material, this Ivanka Trump tweet appears to violate ethics standards for executive branch employees who aren't supposed to use their public office for product endorsements, like for hotel chains the president owns, or for a jewelry brand the president's daughter owns, or for, beans. Real quick, we mentioned Kanye's supposed bid for presidency in the show exactly 1 week ago. Here's what I said. We'll try not to give this more time than it deserves. Well, time's up. Kanye has announced he's no longer running for president. That's it. That's all I'm going to say. Contact tracing, the method of preventing the spread of a disease by identifying infected people and their contacts to disrupt transmission, was supposed to be significant in stopping the spread of COVID-19 stateside. There was even buy-in from companies like Apple and Google, but as Newsy's Tyler Atkinson explains, the adoption of contact tracing technology has had some serious setbacks.
When the first wave of COVID-19 hit the US, tech giants like Apple and Google announced contact tracing plans that were said to be game changers for combating the spread of the virus. Now, privacy concerns are stalling tracing app rollouts. In testimony to Congress, Brian McClendon, former vice president of engineering at Google, says some data concerns are valid.
The other, more serious problem with location data is that it contains personally identifiable information that can be impossible to algorithmically remove. If I can guess where someone works and lives, I can easily figure out who that person is. usually by pulling additional data from commercially available data sources like Equifax.
Concerns about data tracing were largely raised by people living in North Dakota and Utah. As of late June, only 4% of North Dakotans use the state's GPS location tracing app. North Dakota is now working on a second, more secure app built around the Apple-Google exposure notification framework. Newsy's Zach Toombs recently explained how this works in an episode of our virology series.
Two strangers share the same park bench and have a brief conversation. Each of their phones have a contact tracing app that uses Bluetooth to record that the two devices have been near each other through unique identifying beacons.
Computer science professor Kurt Roloff told Newsy this effort may address Americans' privacy concerns around data misuse because it's, quote, very privacy sensitive.
The Apple-Google approach, if done correctly, would actually minimize the leaking information because there's extra cryptographic techniques that are put on top to maintain privacy.
But he also noted that even with the privacy protections, this approach still has a similar drawback as other state government tracing apps.
It requires people to actively opt in, and you're likely only to get a small fraction of the population who will actively go and decide they actually want to do this.
This is the case for most states. As of mid-July, only North Dakota, South Carolina, Alabama, and Virginia had confirmed they would use the company's exposure notification framework as part of their tracing efforts. As with most of the COVID-19 response efforts, experts say that contact tracing is a patchwork state-based approach that could be solved with a national app. Ramesh Roskar of MIT says that even if we can't get automated app tracing to be effective, more personnel are needed immediately.
The need of the hour is augmentation of manual contact tracing with privacy-preserving apps.
The US is well behind other countries on hiring manual contact tracers. It only has about 37,000. A Johns Hopkins report found we need at least 100,000 more to adequately track the illness. Tyler Adkisson, Newsy, Chicago.
I'm going to be nice and leave some welcome back messages for my colleagues to find in 2021. I'll holler at y'all in just a few. Excited that you found Newsy's clear, straightforward news reporting? Just remember, you can come back every morning for fresh, up-to-date stories and get your day started with news that matters most to you. On your schedule, anytime you need us, every day. All facts, no opinion. We're Newsy. Be informed, not influenced.
There's 3 American girls competing for the top 2 Olympic spots.
I could go into this and come out with nothing.
With unemployment at Great Depression levels and so many businesses shuttered for a second time or out for good, how and why is the stock market doing so well? For Newsy's Virology series, Ellen Rolfe has talked to the experts to break down this gap between Wall Street and the street where the rest of the American economy lives.
On Main Street, Americans are struggling. COVID-19 has forced businesses to shut their doors, travel has been put on hold, and consumers have cut down their spending. But on Wall Street, stocks are rallying. So how have financial markets become so disconnected with the realities on the ground? Here's why Wall Street and Main Street have diverged.
Coronavirus fears wiped out all of this year's stock market gains.
Wall Street ending one of the worst weeks of trading since the financial crisis in 2008.
In mid-February, COVID-19 began spreading to more countries, and as the number of cases rose, the stock market plummeted.
This recession essentially came out of nowhere because it wasn't a financial crisis that is leading to it. It was a global health pandemic.
But by the end of March, the downward trend on Wall Street reversed, and stock market values bounced back, returning to similar levels it had been a year ago, when the unemployment rate was less than 4%. The official unemployment rate reached 14.7% by the end of April.
This is one of the best weeks in the stock market, so I think there's a tremendous feeling of optimism in this country.
You've probably heard this before, but the stock market is not the economy. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, for example, has only 30 of the biggest companies in the US. The S&P 500 has, well, you guessed it, 500 companies. Absent from these carefully curated lists are the 30 million small businesses with fewer than 500 employees.
Most people assume stock prices are closely linked
to profits and profits only. But that's not really what's going on.
Jay Zagorski says the recent stock market recovery can be explained by two other factors.
So when a disaster hits this country like COVID-19, the Federal Reserve, the central bank of this country, lowered interest rates. And that boosted stocks.
Lower interest rates make borrowing money cheaper, so big businesses tend to increase spending and investors can take more risks.
But right now, I think what a lot of financial traders are looking at is the demise of competition. As the COVID-19 shutdown expands, more and more companies are at risk of bankruptcy. Let me give you a quick example. There's really three big cruise ships lines. There's Carnival, Royal Caribbean, and Norwegian. Norwegian cruise ships said that they are at risk for going bankrupt. If you take one of the three big players out of the market, that means there's less competition for the other two, and once people decide to go back to cruise ships, there's less price competition. That'll boost their future profits.
This example highlights another important thing to remember about the stock market. It focuses on the future. If investors believe the worst parts of the pandemic are in the past, that means there's nowhere to go but up. But the country's economic health depends on more than stocks. Things like GDP, consumer spending, housing values, and employment.
The labor market is a more important indicator to measure because that looks at how much people are able to work, whether or not people are getting the hours that they need, what their pay is. That is really how people make ends meet in the economy.
The Bureau of Labor Statistics stated that of the 20 million newly unemployed, 18 million were on temporary layoff. So the big question is, will all these people return to work? And as states ease quarantine measures and businesses reopen, is it safe to say that the worst is behind us?
It is possible that it will rebound faster than the Great Recession, but we don't know when the rebound will happen because we don't know when this is going to be over because essentially we're waiting on a vaccine, right? And that takes time.
Hopefully we've conditioned you to expect what's coming next at this point, but if not, here's where you can find us.
At Newsy, we're focused on facts and solutions.
Talking with medical workers on the front lines, decision makers, and everyday people.
All of us fighting COVID-19.
Newsy, be informed, not influenced.
Health experts have reiterated that a vaccine for the coronavirus won't be available until late this year at the earliest. But 2 more coronavirus vaccines are already being fast-tracked for FDA approval. James Packard has more.
Another 2 coronavirus vaccines have a fast track toward approval. Pfizer and BioNTech announcing the FDA gave them the green light for 2 vaccine candidates.
What we're trying to do is do things simultaneously that we used to do one after the other. You and I, through our taxes, are already investing in manufacturing certain vaccines before the trial is finished.
BioNTech says in some cases its vaccines with Pfizer produced almost triple the number of coronavirus antibodies as those in recovered COVID-19 patients.
We like it when the vaccines produce antibodies at least as high as the natural infection, and higher is better.
The question is, what's the binding constant? What's the stickiness of the antibodies? The antibodies stick to the virus like Velcro, so that's why we still have to do the trial.
The vaccines are just the latest to get in the fast lane. Moderna got a fast track in May, and already it's generating optimism on Wall Street that a vaccine may be ready by year's end. Just Monday, a Jefferies Financial Group analyst said he thinks Moderna's vaccine could generate billions of dollars in government contracts, his firm urging investors to buy.
We have world-class scientists here in Queensland.
And the worldwide effort adding another human trial Monday, this time in Australia at Queensland University.
This is the first in human, a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study. There will also be dose escalation component to determine the optimal vaccine dose for future studies.
The National Institutes of Health alone counts at least 58 active studies worldwide for a vaccine against COVID-19.
It wouldn't be the first time that a candidate vaccine stumbled at phase 3. Phase 3 is sort of where the rubber meets the road.
But cautiously optimistic, Pfizer and BioNTech think they could have 100 million doses ready by the end of the year. Moderna aiming to produce 500 million to 1 billion doses a year starting in 2021.
How do we prioritize who gets those first?
That's a very important and very ethically important question. There's general understanding that perhaps healthcare workers who have face-to-face contact with patients with COVID probably should be first. After that, there's still a long discussion that's going on.
The ethical debate of the year amid a mad dash to get a life-saving vaccine on the market.
The vaccine is months away in the best case scenario. Do not alter your behavior away from being safe now because you read a headline about a vaccine.
James Packard, Newsy, Chicago.
This is a weird time during this pandemic, obviously. In some places, restrictions are being reapplied, but in others, people are going back to work. And if you have questions about workers' compensation, unemployment, and safety, Newsy's Kat Sandoval spoke to some experts that might have a few answers for you.
As more states reopen for business, we wanted to explore what rights employees have when they're asked to go back to work. So we asked 3 questions to 3 experts. Question 1. If I get COVID-19 at work, am I entitled to workers' compensation?
Workers' comp is a state-by-state system, and every state has a different law. And I know it's very hard in some states. If you have an occupational illness and your employer contests it to show that it was work-related, the burden becomes on the worker. So there are states moving. So I bet in the next couple of weeks, you're going to see more states moving to cover COVID-19 at work.
States like California have been very generous. They just passed a law saying that anyone who gets COVID-19 and was working automatically is going to get workers' compensation, and there's no way around it.
You've probably seen this lately. Retail workers attacked by customers. A customer sprays Lysol in a cashier's eye. A guard at a Family Dollar store is killed for denying entry to someone not wearing a mask. Which leads us to our second question. Are companies obligated to protect workers from challenging customers who don't want to follow the rules?
The general rule in any type of law is that if you don't know something's going to happen, if you don't have knowledge, then you are not liable. So therefore, employers are probably not going to be held liable if something unfortunate happens in a moment's notice in the office or at work.
Employers don't have an obligation to protect workers from customers who are being difficult or, if they attack them, they need to call police. If someone's hurt, they do have that obligation, but they have no other obligation to protect them from COVID-19, from customers who are not social distancing or not wearing masks.
And our last question. If I make more money from unemployment than my regular salary, do I need to go back to work?
If you're making more money on unemployment than you were making at work, you're still going to have to go back to work if the job opens up again. You can't refuse to work because you're making more money.
Your unemployment is supposed to be in lieu of your salary. If you're making salary, then get off your couch and get back there and go to work. That's the bottom line.
Kat Sandoval, Newsy, Chicago.
That's it for tonight's show. If this was a bar, I'd tell you to tip your bartender, and you don't have to go home, but you got to get out of here. But since this isn't your neighborhood dive, I'll just invite you back tomorrow. Same time, same place for more in the Loop. But don't go anywhere just yet. More top stories from Newsy are headed your way right now.